The fluorescent lights of the grocery store flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the near-empty aisles. It was almost closing time. The usual chatter of families, kids begging for candy and carts clattering through the rows, had died down. Only a handful of late-night shoppers remained. At the end of checkout lane number 4, a man stood frozen in place, clutching a small pack of baby diapers against his chest. His name was James Carter. His face told the story before his words ever could. His unshaven jaw, his sunken eyes rimmed with exhaustion, his jacket that had long lost its color. He looked like a man running not just on empty pockets, but on empty hope. The cashier scanned the pack. "12.47, she said flatly, her voice echoing in the quiet store. James reached into his jeans pocket. Out came a crumpled $10 bill, a worn 5, and a scatter of coins he'd counted and recounted before leaving the house. His fingers trembled as he placed the money on the counter, carefully straightening the bills as if respect might somehow increase their value. The cashier began counting. Beep, beep. The register blinked. She looked up at him. Her expression softened. "I'm sorry, sir, you're short. 37 cents. The words sliced through the air. James froze. 37 cents. Just 37 cents stood between him and the only thing he came for. The one thing his baby girl needed tonight. His throat tightened. He searched his pockets again, desperately hoping for a hidden coin. Nothing. Just lint and dust. Behind him, a man in a suit sighed loudly. "Come on, buddy, some of us don't have all night." Someone else muttered, "Figures." James's face flushed red. Shame burned inside him. He lowered his head, his voice barely a whisper. Can I just get the smaller pack instead?" Cashier hesitated, glancing at the people in line. "I'll need to call a manager to void this one." And that's when it happened. A voice behind James spoke. Calm, firm, steady. "I'll take them all." James turned around slowly, his eyes meeting a tall, silver-haired man in a dark overcoat. His presence was commanding, but his eyes carried a loneliness that no wealth could hide. In that single moment, James's life, and the stranger's, were about to change forever. James's fingers twitched nervously as he stood frozen at the counter, the stranger's words echoing in his ears. "I'll take them all." It didn't make sense. Why would anyone, let alone a man dressed in an expensive overcoat, offer to buy not just one pack, but every pack of diapers in the store? James felt his cheeks flush hotter. He wanted to refuse, to protect the little pride he had left, but at the same time he thought of Lily, his baby girl sleeping at home wrapped in the same diaper for far too long. How did his life come to this? Just a year ago, things had been different. James had a stable job as a mechanic. Grease-stained hands, long hours, but honest pay. He and his wife Rachel had dreamed of saving enough to buy a modest house with a backyard. They imagined lilies, laughter echoing off white picket fences. But Rachel's pregnancy had been hard, medical bills stacked high. When Lily was only 2 months old, tragedy struck. A sudden illness swept Rachel into the hospital. Doctors fought, James prayed, but in a matter of weeks she was gone. He could still remember the hospital room, the sterile smell, the quiet beeping of machines, Rachel's hand slipping out of his grasp as he whispered, "I'll take care of her, I promise." From that night, James's world shrank into a single responsibility: raising Lily. Being a single dad wasn't just hard, it was relentless. His boss cut his hours because business was slow. Rent notices piled up at his apartment door. He learned to stretch every dollar, skipping meals so Lily wouldn't go hungry, washing clothes by hand to save quarters for formula. And then tonight happened. Lily had cried herself red-faced, her diaper soaked through, while James dug through drawers for spare change. When he found exactly $12.10, he thought maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. But it wasn't. 37 cents stood like a mountain he couldn't climb. James swallowed hard, his pride screaming louder than his need. He looked at the cashier, again. "Please, just cancel it. I'll figure something out." But before she could move, the silver-haired man placed his credit card firmly on the counter. "Ring them all up," he repeated, his voice calm but unshakable. The cashier blinked, unsure. "Sir, do you mean—" "Yes," the man interrupted. "Every size of diapers, formula, wipes, everything a child might need. Put it all on my card." The line behind them grew quiet. Shoppers who moments ago had been impatient now stared, curious. James turned, his voice cracking. "Why? Why would you do this? You don't even know me. I don't need your charity." The man looked at him with eyes that carried both authority and a strange sadness. "This isn't charity. This is humanity. There's a difference." James didn't know who the man was, but to others, his face might have been familiar. Richard Hale. A name splashed across business magazines and financial news. A man whispered about in boardrooms as one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. Yet standing there, Richard didn't look like power. He looked tired. A kind of tired that came not from lack of sleep but from lack of peace. As the cashier began scanning one item after another, James noticed Richard's gaze drift. Not at the shelves, not at the people, but somewhere far away. His jaw clenched, his lips pressed into a thin line. He looked like a man carrying a burden no money could lighten. And though James didn't know it yet, Richard's story was about to collide with his own in ways neither of them could predict. The conveyor belt filled with diapers and baby food. James stood paralyzed, torn between shame and gratitude, while Richard remained steady, his card ready, his reasons hidden deep inside. One man broke by poverty, the other by loneliness. And on that night, in that grocery store, their worlds quietly began to intertwine. The conveyor belt was now stacked high with packs of diapers, cans of formula, jars of baby food, and baby wipes. Every beep of the scanner was like a heartbeat, echoing louder than the silence in the store. James stood frozen, his hands trembling, his throat dry. The more the items piled up, the more his shame grew. It felt unreal, as if he were watching someone else's life unfold. Finally, unable to take it anymore, he whispered, "Sir, please, this is too much. I can't let you do this. You don't know me. You don't know what kind of man I am." The stranger, Richard, turned to face him. His eyes locked onto James's, steady and unflinching. "You're a father," he said simply. "That tells me everything I need to know." Those words stunned James. He didn't know whether to feel comforted or more broken. As the cashier bagged the items, Richard stood quietly, his hands resting on the counter. He seemed calm, but something about him felt heavy, as if unseen memories pressed against his chest. When James tried to speak again, Richard interrupted softly. "Do you know the one thing money can't buy?" James blinked. "What's that?" Richard's eyes drifted away, his voice low. "Time. Once it's gone forever." It was an odd answer. James frowned, confused, but before he could ask more, Richard nodded at the cashier. "Put it all in boxes. He'll need help carrying this out." The young cashier looked at James, then back at Richard. She hesitated, then began boxing everything as instructed. As the line moved on, James finally gathered the courage to speak again. "Why would you do this for a stranger? What do you get out of it?" For the first time, Richard's confident mask cracked. His lips pressed together, his jaw tightening. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Because once, I needed someone to help me, and no one did." The words lingered in the air, heavier than any silence. James studied him more closely. The tailored coat, the polished shoes, the expensive watch. Clearly, this man wasn't hurting for money. But behind his sharp appearance, his eyes told a different story, eyes that had seen loss, maybe even regret. Richard turned slightly, as if to shield his face. His gaze landed on a shelf of candy near the register, but he wasn't really looking at it. He was somewhere else, lost in a memory only he could see. At that moment, James realized something strange. This wasn't just about kindness. The way Richard spoke, the way his hand lingered on the counter, the way his eyes dimmed when he mentioned time. It felt personal. This man had lived through something painful. James wanted to ask, "What happened to you?" But the weight in Richard's expression made him stop. Instead, James whispered, "Thank you. From me, and from my daughter." Richard gave a small smile, though it looked more like a wound trying to heal. "Don't thank me yet, just promise me one thing." James furrowed his brows. "What's that?" "Promise me. You'll always be there for her, no matter how hard it gets. Don't let work, money, or anything else steal your time from her." James's chest tightened. Those words, they weren't casual advice. They were a confession. The boxes were filled, the receipt printed. To the other shoppers, it was just a strange act of generosity. But to James, it felt like something far deeper, as if this stranger was speaking from wounds he still carried. And, though James didn't know the full truth yet, the man standing before him wasn't just a lonely CEO. He was someone haunted by a past he couldn't undo, and tonight, by helping a broke single dad, he was quietly trying to rewrite a piece of his own story. The store's automatic doors slid open with a hiss. The night air was sharp and cold, carrying the faint hum of traffic from the street. James followed Richard out, his arms heavy with boxes of baby supplies. It should have felt like relief. Instead, James's chest ached with questions. He couldn't shake Richard's words. Time. Once it's gone forever. As they reached the parking lot, Richard gestured to a sleek black car parked under the streetlight. But, instead of leaving right away, he stopped, slipping his hands into his coat pockets, staring at the ground as if wrestling with something inside him. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quieter now, stripped of authority. "I wasn't always alone, you know." James looked at him carefully, sensing this was something Richard didn't share easily. "I had a daughter once," Richard began, his gaze fixed on the pavement. "Her name was Emily. She was everything to me." James froze, his grip tightening on the box in his hands. Richard continued, his voice heavy with pain. "I thought success would give her the world. I thought building an empire, running a company, making millions would make me a good father. But all she ever wanted was me." His throat tightened, and for the first time, his composure cracked. His hand brushed over his eyes as though wiping away something he couldn't hold back anymore. "I missed birthdays, school plays, bedtime stories, always telling myself, next time I'll be there. But next time never came." James's heart pounded. He had no words, only the sting of empathy rising in his chest. Richard's voice broke as he whispered the words that cut deeper than any wound. "One day, she got sick, and I wasn't there. I was in a boardroom, signing papers that meant nothing. By the time I reached the hospital, it was too late. She was gone. And all I had left were toys in her room and a clock that never stopped reminding me how late I was. The silence that followed was unbearable. The night seemed to hold its breath." James felt his throat close. He set the box down slowly, stepping closer. "Richard," he whispered. I don't know what to say." Richard shook his head. "There's nothing to say. I failed her. I let time slip through my fingers, and now I spend my life trying to give to others what I couldn't give to my own child. Because I can't go back, I can't fix it." His voice trembled, and his shoulders sagged under the invisible weight of regret. James's eyes burned with tears. For the first time, he didn't see a wealthy CEO, a man of power and control. He saw a father, broken, grieving, human, and in that moment, James realized this act of generosity wasn't about pity. It was about redemption. James placed a hand on Richard's arm, his own voice shaking. "You can't change the past. But tonight, you changed mine. My daughter will sleep safely, with food, with diapers, with hope. And that's because of you." Richard's eyes lifted to meet his. For a moment, two men from opposite worlds, one broke, one wealthy, stood united in the same truth. The love of a parent, the ache of loss, the desperate wish to do better. Tears welled in Richard's eyes as James whispered the words that struck straight to his soul. "You didn't save your daughter tonight, but you saved mine." Richard's lips trembled, and for the first time in years, he let the tears fall freely. The parking lot light flickered above them, casting shadows that stretched across the pavement. But for the two men standing there, the weight of the past and the hope of the future collided in one raw, unguarded moment. One father had lost everything. The other had nearly lost hope. And together, they had found something money or pride could never buy, the truth that love given freely was the most powerful gift of all. The night air felt different now, softer, calmer. James stood quietly, still holding one of the boxes Richard had bought for him, while Richard tried to steady his breathing, wiping away the tears he hadn't meant to show. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside, the grocery store seemed to fade, the sound of cars, the glow of headlights, until it was just the two of them, standing in the fragile space between loss and hope. Finally, Richard cleared his throat. His voice was steadier now, though still thick with emotion. "You said I saved your daughter tonight, but the truth is, you saved me too." James frowned, not understanding. Richard gave a small, bittersweet smile. "For the first time in years, I don't feel completely alone. Sharing this with you, it reminded me I'm still human. That maybe, just maybe, it's not too late to do something good with the time I have left." James nodded slowly, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't have much, but I promise you this. I'll give Lily all the time, all the love I have. Even if it means I go hungry, even if it means I lose everything else. She won't grow up feeling like she wasn't enough." Richard's chest tightened at those words. It was the vow he wished he had made long ago. "Hold on to that promise," Richard said, his tone almost pleading. "Because at the end of the day, it's not the houses, the cars, or the bank accounts that matter. It's the bedtime stories, the silly drawings on the fridge, the little hands that reach for yours." James's eyes blurred with tears, but this time, they were tears of strength, not shame. Richard opened the trunk of his car and gestured for James to place the boxes inside. Then, before closing it, he pulled out a simple white business card and handed it to him. "If you ever find yourself struggling again," Richard said softly, "call me. Not because I'm a CEO, not because I'm wealthy, but because sometimes we all need someone to remind us we're not alone." James took the card hesitantly, staring at the embossed name, Richard Hale. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing it gently. "Go home, be with your daughter. That's where you belong." As James drove home in his beat-up car, the boxes stacked beside Lily's car seat, he glanced at his little girl in the rearview mirror. She stirred softly, her tiny fingers curling, a faint smile on her lips as if she sensed the change in her father's heart. James whispered into the night, "We're gonna be okay, baby girl. I promise." Meanwhile, Richard sat in his luxury car under the dim parking lot light, staring at the steering wheel. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the weight of his empire pressing on him. Instead, he felt the echo of a child's laughter, not Emily's but Lily's. A reminder that even in loss, life offered second chances, if you were willing to take them. He whispered into the quiet, "Rest easy, Emily. Tonight, I did something you would have been proud of."